So the Chicago Field Museum has this Pokemon fossil museum exhibit right there, which we're gonna check out. Now, rather than run around recording footage, acting like an obnoxious influencer, I just took some pictures. So we're just gonna kind of look through my pictures I took as we describe what the whole event was like and like my thoughts on it and whatnot. So you get to the museum, as we saw in the horrible intro video. You have this like set of banners at the entrance of the museum that tells you the fossil exhibit is inside. You have to get admission to the museum itself, and then you have to have an additional secondary ticket that costs more money to get into the fossil museum. It's $50 a person essentially for the whole experience, right? You pay was what, 32 for museum entry and then 18 for the fossil museum, something like that. The Pokemon fossil museum, that is. Now, I'm not going to dwell too much on the Field Museum by itself. You should definitely go see the Field Museum in Chicago. Fantastic museum. Lots of awesome skeletons on display, such as this Spinosaurus Sobek. This is also the home of Sue, a very famous Tyrannosaurus specimen. Maximo the Patagotitan is here. So yeah, you should definitely go check out the Chicago Field Museum, regardless of whether or not you're interested in Pokemon. But for the rest of this video, we're going to focus on the Pokemon Fossil Museum because that is the current special event that's going on there. The Pokemon Fossil Museum is a very structured event. You get your ticket, and it has a very explicit timetable for when you can go into that part of the museum. You got to get in line and be admitted. Upon entry, you get this Archeops promo card, which is apparently just a special stamped version of an existing card from one of the sets. I don't know that much about Pokemon cards. But you're handed this upon entry, and then you just go in and you like walk through the exhibits yourself. It's not like a guided tour. It's just the entry to the exhibit itself is very structured, right? Upon entry, you're immediately greeted by this like photo opportunity with this Aerodactyl statue with the excavator Pikachu on its back. Excavator Pikachu is like this like kind of the mascot of the whole thing. It's this Pikachu that's dressed up like Alan Grant from Jurassic Park, basically. And he's all over like the merchandising and scattered across the exhibits. So you get like this little photo opportunity. You also get to see like the kind of this like main logo. There's a good look again at the excavator Pikachu. And you see this this really nice little piece of art here where they got like essentially Pokemon trainer art, but for some of the paleontologists that actually work at the museum. Which was very, very cool to see. Makes me want to like do a Pokemon ROM hack game where I like take these like trainer arts and put it in there so you can actually like fight against like these paleontologists and stuff. That'd be really fun. But yeah, after kind of like the little preamble part, which has like some other little exhibits and stuff that's not really all that interesting, you get into the proper exhibits, which are basically like Pokemon themed museum exhibits where you're essentially experiencing the exhibits as you would if you were like a person in a Pokemon game, right? So like, for instance, here you have the Plume fossil, which is the fossil that you use to revive Arkin in like the Gen 5 games. And so you're seeing that in like a display case, like a faked, Pokemon fossil in this display case. And you also see like these like skeletons, like mounted skeletons of the fossil Pokemon, as if you were like in the same way you would see the mounted skeleton of a dinosaur in the museum proper. In this exhibit, you see the mounted skeleton of the fabricated Pokemon animal. And they have, sometimes they have skeletons for both the pre-Evo and the final form. So you got the Arkin skeleton here and the Archeops here. And so the whole thing is basically set up like you're going through an actual set of museum exhibits. Which is cute. It's fun, it's interesting, but it's not necessarily very informative if that was all there was. But what makes it what brings this event up to like the next level is the fact that they include the real life inspirations alongside of that. So like here we have a really nice model of an Archaeopteryx, which is the inspiration for Arkin and Archeops. And so you can compare like that design to the Pokemon design and see how that looks. So like we got these little like info cards that basically connect you from the Pokemon to the real animal and highlight all that. And they got some really nice like fun like Pokemon style paleo art, which is kind of a highlight of the whole thing. A lot of really nice art on these like placards or whatever. So yeah, they kind of basically started the whole thing with Arkin because Archaeopteryx is very important to the Field Museum. There's the quote unquote Chicago Archaeopteryx fossil that has a whole dedicated section in the museum, which is this like really nice detailed fossil of Archaeopteryx. So I assume that's why Arkin is so prevalent in all of this. You know, it's on the banner, it's the promo card, it's the first exhibit you see in the thing itself. I assume this is all very deliberate because of its special place in the museum now. So after we deal with Arkin, we get to the Aerodactyl section. Now the Aerodactyl section, I thought was a bit of a letdown. There's no skeleton for it. The Aerodactyl has the statue at the very start, but then the actual section in the museum for it very limited. There's like a fake piece of amber for the old amber. You still get these like nice these like Pokemon style paleo arts for some pterosaurs, and you get this like very lovely, very interesting mounted head of a Nyctosaurus. I don't know why they went with a Nyctosaurus. Like it's got nothing to do with Aerodactyl, but it's a very cool like paleo design here. I really like this like tiger striping on the crest and like the blue membrane connecting both the lower beak to the neck and the crest to the neck. I think that's very interesting the way it's got that like waddle that's then echoed by the membrane, and they both have the same color palette. I really like this Nyctosaurus design, which is like cool, but like why Nyctosaurus for Aerodactyl? Why is there no skeleton? Whatever. Aerodactyl's always kind of been a weird one amongst all the fossil Pokemon anyway, since he's the only single stage one, only one with a Mega, comes from Amber instead of a proper fossil. So like, I guess, sure. Moving on. Next, we get to kind of a set of aquatic Pokemon. Basically, you're like round the corner past the Arkin and the Aerodactyl, and you get to a set of like 3 exhibits that are kind of arranged in a triangle. So you could look at these in like any order. I kind of just went with the order these were in my camera roll, and so we're gonna look at Tortuga and Caracosta first. So again, you get like a nice replica of the in-game fossil used to revive these. In this case, the cover fossil. And you get little mounted skeletons. We got a little Tortuga here. You could see the detail put in this, like the plating on the bottom here, reflected in the mirror. Fantastic detail. And that is actually matched by I don't know if this is Archelon or a different turtle, matched by some sort of prehistoric sea turtle mount on the roof above the Tortuga. So you can compare like the Pokemon skeletal, which is this simplified cartoon version, to like the real animal, and you could see where the inspiration comes from and stuff. That was especially notable with these like plates on the belly. You get these again more of this awesome like paleo art here of this actual sea turtle to compare to the actual Tortuga. And a lot of like little interesting information on these placards. I'll highlight a few of these later. But very cool. Then next to Tortuga, you have Relicanth, which I thought was really fun. Because Relicanth, not technically a fossil Pokemon, but is designed in a way to evoke fossil Pokemon aesthetics. Like it's a rock type, just like the fossil Pokemon are, despite it not being a fossil but actually being living. And that's because in the real world, coelacanth is what's often called a living fossil. It's an animal that evolved a long time ago, for a long time was thought extinct, and then was discovered to still be alive, and remains relatively unchanged from the form it had in prehistory, right? And so that's why Relicanth in Pokemon games echoes the design ethos of a fossil Pokemon, despite being found as a normal, water encounter. And including it, in the Fossil Museum highlights that. So we get a nice little coelacanth paleo art there. We get this little model of a Relicanth. And there were like more models of some of this stuff. I took less pictures of like the actual Pokemon models because they're just Pokemon models. It's not that interesting to the Fossil Museum part of things. It didn't seem that worth highlighting, and then yeah, they got some interesting little snippets here that I found kind of amusing in terms of like actual Pokemon lore. But yeah, like talking about motivating why he's like a rock type despite not being like a revived fossil. I think this is kind of a debate people have is like, are the fossils originally rock type or are they only rock type because they're, revived from a fossil? Essentially, if you were to have a original omanite, for example, teleported from the past, would it just be a water type? Is omanite a water rock type because of the revival process? And this, explains, doesn't highlight why that might be, but explains why Relicanth at least is a rock type. So it remains a mystery as to whether a teleported omanite would be a rock type or not. Um, yeah, and like making the connection to like modern species. I found it very interesting that apparently Relicanth walks around on the seafloor, which I never had heard in my life. Like, is that canon? But yeah, again, highlighting like kind of some differences here between Pokemon evolution and like real evolution, right? Then we had the third exhibit in this area was Omanite, and we had Lord Helix himself, the Helix fossil here. I took a picture of the Omastar itself because they had ominous energy. And yeah, these guys didn't have a skeletal obviously because they're soft-bodied animals. Like the Helix fossil is the hard part, right? So it makes sense that these guys didn't have a mounted skeletal. Um, yeah, and apparently this is like saying that Omastar is thought to be a direct ancestor of Octillery, which is funny because how does that explain Remoraid, the little fish that evolves into Octillery? Whatever, it's fine. uh, yeah, and then yeah, paleo art here of some different ammonites. I thought that was neat. Like, this kind of more basic single looped shell ammonite is very evocative of omanite itself, whereas this like extended coiled shell, which is a different species of ammonite, is obviously very distinctive. And it was fun that they had both of these. I was joking like, oh, is this a hint for like a regional variant? And that would, I don't think that's true, but that would be sick to have like alternate forms for some fossil Pokemon that have like distinct variations in the fossil record. Omanite is just generically an Ammonite. That's not a specific one. So you could do a different Ammonite as a variant of Omanite, and that would be really cool. Um, so after you go through these three, aquatic species, you kind of round the corner to the next like big section, which is kind of set up to be almost like the center point of the tour, like the big highlight, and that's because it's the T-Rex Tyrantrum. I will say this Tyrantrum skeleton felt really lackluster, like low detail compared to some of the other skeletons of the exhibit. The tail is set up really weirdly with like these very chunky, undetailed vertebra. The spine, the vertical processes on the spine here are they feel like wooden cutouts. They're very flat and like unrealistic. The overall general detail of the skeleton's very limited. The arms are so weird because they're just kind of these like chunks that just kind of almost look like they form off of a rib. I think this is actually meant to be a shoulder blade, but because of the positioning of it, it kind of like positions the shoulder blade as just another rib. Weirdly, very awkward. Uh, got the distinct impression that maybe there were like two generations of fossil models here, that maybe this started as a small, more gimmicky exhibit with things like this Tyrantrum, and then expanded out to cover all of the fossil Pokemon. Because a lot of the other Pokemon skeletals were like surprisingly detailed, in a way this one really wasn't, which as kind of a centerpiece of the whole exhibit was a bit underwhelming. And that kind of extends over to the Tyrunt here, which again has these like very like wooden puzzle model type like spinal processes and stuff. It very weird and awkward and not as cool as some of the other ones. We did get some interesting paleo art of like an incredibly chunky feathery Tyrannosaurus, which was pretty cool. Very thick. Look at how how low to the ground that fella is. Um, and then yeah, we got another little basically every species had like these dual info boards, like the paleo art one for the real animal, and then one for like the Pokemon within the the context of Pokemon. I thought this was very interesting here, where they were talking about like these restored fossil Pokemon not being fully accurate representations. and talking about like maybe Tyrant is supposed to be more feathered than it is. This is just Jurassic Park lore. This is the thing they said in like Jurassic World marketing material. I forget there was a name for this, like the I forgot what the term for this was. They had like a specific label for this on the marketing material, basically saying that um the genes that coded for like the feathers and the dinosaurs were like repressed by the process in which they used frog DNA to fill in the sequence gaps, and that's why the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park didn't have feathers. It was a mistake made in the process of cloning them and bringing them back. And I thought it was very funny to just like borrow that lore from Jurassic Park and just put it into Pokemon to explain potentially anatomical differences, even within the universe of Pokemon. Very interesting and funny choice. I got a big kick out of that. I did. This is the jaw fossil that revives Tyrant. I thought this was shockingly lame. It's just like a little like lump. It doesn't really evoke a jaw at all. But this is actually pretty true to the fossil in game, which is the big thing. These like fossils do seem to be very much designed after their video game appearances, and this one just happens to be inherently lackluster, so you can't blame them for that one. Across from Tyrant, we had Kabuto and Kabutops. I originally was super psyched for this Kabutops mount because I'm like, oh, that looks just like the games, right? Like, I'm pretty sure that's the pose from the museum in the game, and I'm like, that's so cool that they just copied that. And then when I was putting together, this like basically a slideshow here for this video, uh, it became apparent that wasn't the case. That I just, kind of assumed that, I guess, and like actually seeing the stuff from the games, it was like a little eye opening, and that like I was just wrong. So here's a couple of different shots of how Kabutops, the skeleton, the fossil mount, the skeleton of Kabutops in the Pewter Museum looks. So we've got the Gen 1 sprite down below, which looks completely different. And then the Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee version of it, which also looks pretty different. Like, in both cases, it's got one foot clearly forward of the other foot, and the pose is actually a little more dynamic than this mount is. And interestingly, the skeletal here on the Kabutops is definitely based off like the Let's Go Pikachu Eevee like skeleton, and not the original, which has a lot more holes in the skull. So I thought it was pretty interesting. I guess holes in the exoskeleton, ambiguous. The Kabuto they had here was interesting because they actually like lit up the little bottom eyes, or the big bottom eyes, like those red glowing spotlights. It's kind of funny. Um, yeah, Kabutops. They say here it's a hard exoskeleton, so I suppose it makes more sense for the Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee version of the skeleton, because that does evoke more of the actual like, you know, uh shape of like the head, right? And then the holes in the skull that you see in like the Gen 1 version of that sprite don't really echo anything in the revived fossil, so it does kind of make sense to go with the newer skeleton. It makes like it matches the actual animal design more. Seems reasonable. And then yeah, the Kabuto. This was one of those things like about Pokemon where it's like there's a lot of like eye spots or fake eyes, and like I never know whose eyes are real. And in this case, apparently both the top eyes and bottom eyes of Kabuto are real, so that's cool, I guess. And then yeah, a little Pokemon art style horseshoe crab, which is interesting. I always took Kabuto to be more Trilobite inspired than horseshoe crab inspired, although it's definitely drawing from both. But they went with the horseshoe crab here, which I thought was fine, if not a little disappointing, because a trilobite would have been neat to see. But if you look at the fossil, like the dome fossil, this is very horseshoe crab coated, which also makes it understandable that they go with the horseshoe crab here. Like, this is just a horseshoe crab. This is not a trilobite at all. So yeah, and I mean, Pokemon often combines different animals together to create a Pokemon, so it makes sense that it would be, drawn from a few different areas. Also, it is interesting to me that the dome fossil really doesn't resemble Kabuto at all, because Kabuto's got those two sets of paired limbs tucked underneath the body. It's got nothing going on really back here on the back end like this. Um, it's kind of strange. Like in retrospect, seeing like a physical model of the fossil and a Kabuto, it's just like, what were they thinking? Gen 1 stuff. After that, we hit up Anorith and Armaldo. So there's the claw fossil. There's the little info board with a really nice Anomalocaris Pokemon style paleo art, which was interesting to look at because this is really just Anorith. Like seeing an Anomalocaris in this art style really highlighted how Anorith is just an Anomalocaris. He's got nothing else unique going on. He's just an Anomalocaris, which is good because it's a weird animal and it works really well for a Pokemon. And then it evolves into Armaldo and gets weird anyway. So like the first form being kind of just an animal is completely reasonable take. We get to one of my favorite fossils after that, the Leap Cradily line. So there's the root fossil, and there's a nice little. I had to take a picture of the Lily model they had because he's my guy. I mean, I'm more so Cradily, I guess, but I like the whole evil line. And they were there's the actual crinoid paleo art, very cool. After that, it is oh 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 fake fan. What's the name? I forgot it. Auroras. Amora and Auroras? I've literally never used these guys. Okay. But yeah, they got the Amargasaurus art here. Really nice with like actually having like the claw details on the foot. Like it's a good paleo art, but it's also stylized to look very Pokemon like, which is a really fun combo. There's the skeletal for it. I've seen a skeleton for Auroras before where like the sail here is like a solid piece, which always feels a little wrong because like in a Margosaurus skeleton you have these supporting spines and the sail is just skin, but also it's a Pokemon, it's not real. And here we have the sail fossil, which is kind of just a weird little lump, but I suppose the sail being like a solid fossil piece means that the sail on the animal has to be solid bone instead of a spines that are supporting a flesh sail. Kind of weird though, because like you feel like it's got to be flexible, right? The skeletal would imply that the neck of this guy is completely rigid, unless they're supposed to be like cartilage or something for the sails that allow it to have some flexibility. Strange design choice, not the fault of the Fossil Museum, just a weird quirk of the Pokemon itself. After that, we get the Shield fossil, Shieldon and Bastiodon, with this Bastiodon skeleton, which also looked very like similarly weird and low quality to the way the Tyrantrum did, with like the like toes are just kind of sculpted out of the legs here. And some of the details are just like limited and fuzzy in a way that the Tyrantrum was. So I feel like maybe the original exhibit or something was like just Tyrantrum and Bastiodon for that like Triceratops versus T-Rex aesthetic or something. I don't know, hard to say. There's just a shot of the Protoceratops skull and Triceratops horn they had on display for kind of a counterpoint to the fossil animal. There were a few other actual fossils included that I didn't like put in the pictures here because I guess I just didn't take them. There's the paleo art, looking at a pretty nice Protoceratops with this like spiny mane going down the tail. Maybe this is a little more evocative of like fur when it should be very much explicitly like quills on the tail probably, but it's still a very cool design. And then yeah, you got kind of a little bit of a look at a Triceratops and a Pentaceratops down here as well, down on the corner. Kind of doing a Shieldon to Bastiodon sort of evolutionary stage thing, which was a fun comparison to draw. Near the end of the tour now, we get to Cranidos and Rampardos. There's the what is this fossil called? Because I wanted to say Dome, but Dome is Kabuto. What is this? Shield? No, Shield is Shieldon. Here's this fossil that exists. Skull fossil? I think it's like skull or something. Yeah, they had this little info board, of course, with the paleo art for the real animal, showing the different growth stages of like Dracorex into Stygimoloch into like Pachycephalosaurus, which was fun. They didn't explicitly at any point ever call these like call any the controversy into light. Like they never called anything Stygimoloch or Drigorex here. It's just Pachycephalosaurus growth stages, which is a good way to approach this because you don't need to get into the weeds on, you know, is Stygimoloch distinct enough to be a separate animal from Pachycephalosaurus, all that. No reason to get into it here. But it is fun to see the ontogeny highlighted as it grows up, which is kind of the other take on Pokemon evolution, right? Sometimes it's like, here's a primitive version of a thing, and here's the more evolved version, echoing real life evolution. And other times it kind of just echoes an animal growing from a baby into an adult. Um, so it makes sense to highlight that as well, that different angle on that. Surprisingly nice skeletal for Rampardos. Like you could even see how the Rampardos is like more whitish bone colored versus the very like wood colored Tyrantrum and Bastiodon. Um, I thought that was kind of interesting. Yeah, just like a lot more detail going on here with it, like in terms of the bones. Like they modeled like hip bones inside, like the shoulder blades look proper. Very strange that they're like inconsistent like that. So yeah, that was like the last exhibit on the tour. After finishing the little tour, you can then go across the hall away from the main exhibit to go to the gift shop specifically for Pokemon. Like they had their own dedicated gift shop, and because of the rampant scalping problems with Pokemon, you had to have this little like receipt with an identifier number that you would trade for a few items, and they had strict limits on how many items you could get, including an explicit restriction on the Pikachu excavator plush. So very like sad that this event had to go through so much like essentially so much policing of like what you could do just out of fear of scalpers ruining it for everybody. And what a world we live in, huh? So the Pikachu plush is just literally like a little stuffed animal version of Pikachu. I didn't buy this because I'm an adult man. I don't need this. I don't need this in my life. I need money for like food and stuff. But I just thought I'd include a little shot of him there so you know what I'm missing out on, right? So yeah. What I did buy was a couple of shirts. They had some very solid shirts. Hold on. Let me grab a shirt real quick. I literally have one. But yeah, amongst the other smaller things, they had a lot of shirts. They had like a Pikachu shirt. They had a pretty nice Archeops shirt, and then they had this Tyrantrum shirt, which I went with. So like kind of a skeletal diagram of Tyrantrum there. Yeah, so that seemed cool. That seemed like a shirt that I, as a grown ass man, could wear and get away with wearing without obviously being wearing just like a Pokemon on my shirt. So yeah. Also, I took a picture of this, and I'm going to include it here at the very end. This like shockingly turd-like fossilized turd. It's apparently a crocodile coprolite. So they had near the beginning of the tour, they kind of had this like display case setup, which is like some different random fossils in it. Talking kind of about like the different types of fossils you would get. There's like some hadrosaur teeth or something like that, a few other like trace fossil things, and then a coprolite. I was kind of surprised that they included a turd on the tour, but so it's an important trace fossil, okay? Paleontologically speaking, very useful. So yeah, that was kind of the whole experience I had there with the Pokemon Fossil Museum. I feel like as a grown ass man and a dinosaur and paleontology enthusiast, it didn't really like explicitly do anything for me, right? It wasn't an exhibit that was made for somebody like me, but it was a fun amusement, a fun aside. Like if you're you know big into fossils and stuff, you probably shouldn't be going to the Field Museum just for this. On the other hand, if you've got like young children or whatever who are getting into fossils and are into Pokemon, this could be like the perfect time to kind of get them even more excited about that by connecting it to something they love, right? So I could definitely see some value from this sort of thing. And like it was a popular attraction. Like there were people lining up for this all day. Tickets were selling out constantly. Like definitely this is getting people out into the museum, which is fantastic. So yeah. And it's not like I regret going to this. Like we were planning to go to find something new in Chicago. We wanted to go back to the Field Museum. We went last year as a group. And so it was like a perfect little opportunity of like, oh, they have the Pokemon Fossil Museum. We can go check that out too. So at least there's something new to see versus what we saw last year. Not that we need something new to see because the museum is cool on its own, but it was definitely, a fun thing to do. And I don't feel bad about spending like the $18 or whatever it was to get in once I was already planning to go to the museum, right? That's my point. My point is, if you're a grown-ass man and you're going only for this, probably not worth it. If you're going to the museum anyway, you might as well also go to this if you are interested in Pokemon, even if you don't have kids. There were plenty of non-children groups there. So, yeah, I mean, I recommend it with, like, those caveats, right? So, yeah, I think that's about all I have to say. Gotta catch them all. Oh, we got audio and video. I'm here outside the Field Museum, hiding from the blistering sun in the shade. But they have a Pokemon thing. That's awful.